Hello sailors, this is the Dodgy Kebab, and I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, Dodgy you muppet, there was no patch 1.13, 1.12.2 was the final vanilla patch, and you would be right. But I've uncovered enough evidence that I can confidently say that Vanilla WoW was not originally designed to end at Nax Ramis. I'm going to show you that a huge quest and raid section was removed from the game and turned into the first expansion pack, the Burning Crusade. Now, I know what you're thinking.
Why?
Well, the conversation for Warcraft Classic has gone off in so many different directions. One of them being, should Blizzard add more content once Classic realms are fully progressed, and what that content should be. People who are in favour of this utterly mental idea keep coming back to the notion that Blizzard should put in content that was cut from vanilla. Some like to point to the Emerald Dream, which actually appears in the game files as far back as April 2004 in the 0.6 beta Warcraft client. I'd argue that although they always wanted to put it in the game, they never really got anywhere with it at this stage. Another piece of content that is known is something called the Dragon Isles, which was first in Warcraft 2 and had a small amount of work put into it, although the truth seems to be that not a lot of work was ever put into this idea, even less so than the original Emerald Dream. This area only seems to be mentioned a lot because Blizzard had actually talks about it a couple of times when speaking about the game's development.
Here is an old map of Eastern Kingdoms, so it shows, something up here called the Dragon Isles raid.
But these two areas are clearly just development tests when compared to the Dark Portal storyline. I believe that after Nax, players were to journey to the inside of Karazhan and beat the raid, which would have granted entry into the Caverns of Time, so you could enter the Black Morass and beat that dungeon instance. Once beaten, it would reward you with a key or an item that would let you open the Dark Portal to gain access to Hellfire Peninsula. I'm convinced this was originally going to be part of the vanilla game, and it wasn't until halfway through Vanilla's life they changed their minds and decided to rework this section into the entire Burning Crusade expansion. Some of you right now are going to think that this all just sounds ridiculous, so allow me to present my evidence.
We didn't want our Elder game to only be about raid content. We also are trying to provide high-end game PvP content for players, and we also wanted to have our world have a sense of community and have some dynamic things that change throughout the world. In the raid game, a lot of these creatures, as you progress through them, will not even be available when the game first goes live. Like one example that we've talked about is the concept of Outland, which we introduced in Warcraft 3. And Outland is this area that actually is on another kind of planet that is beyond the Dark Portal. And the Dark Portal has been closed for many years. Players on each of the different realms will have to find out how to open the Dark Portal again. And only once the players of each of these realms open that Dark Portal will people be able to go through it and find all the Uber creatures beyond that.
The section you just heard was from the bonus DVD included with the Vanilla Collector's Edition, so obviously that was recorded before the game launched. The topic in that clip is about content that is not accessible when the game first launches, rather that players will have to work out how to open the Dark Portal. So the idea was planned before the game launched, and by Blizzard's own admission in the following clip, no expansion pack was even underway until 10 months after the launch of Vanilla.
We spent, all of our time really just trying to get things under control, and I would really say it was about 9 to 12 months after launch before we were like, I guess we should make an expansion for this game.
So we can confidently say that the Dark Portal event was planned well before the Burning Crusade expansion was even thought about. But what about the rest of my theory? What about Karazhan, the Black Morass, and the Caverns of Time all appearing in Vanilla? Well, most of you will know that lately I've spent a lot of time poking around the game files of the different alpha and beta Warcraft clients, as well as reinstating inactive code into the Vanilla client. Well, all versions of WoW from 0.6 to 1.12 features a different version of Hellfire Peninsula to that seen in the Burning Crusade. Although very similar in feel, the layout and use of assets is very different. Right now, you can see me speeding around this map on the 0.8 client, and the amount of work that has been done at this very early stage shows that this must have been quite high on the priority list. As too was the Black Morass. Although I'm using the 1.12.1 vanilla client for this footage, it appeared as far back as September 2004 in the 0.10 beta client, which is just over 2 entire years before the Burning Crusade even went live. All the assets are finished, the style is done, it's just as we saw in TBC. As for the Caverns of Time, well, that was totally finished in vanilla too. It was just blocked off by a large stone at the entrance, but if you used a sneaky wall climbing technique, or in my case a GM fly command, you can just enter the cavern through a hole in the roof of the building that's built into the rock. You can see from this footage that, like the Black Morass, this area is totally finished too and looks almost the same as what we would finally see in the Burning Crusade. But the final piece of this puzzle is Karazhan. As a side note, it's worth remembering that Atish, Great Staff of the Guardian, which is gained by piecing together parts that are mostly found in Nax, has a use of creating a portal to the Karazhan entrance, which would have been totally useless to people playing in vanilla at the time, but I think was designed to be an item that was going to be to lead on to Karazhan. Anyway, Karazhan was being worked on during the beta stages of World of Warcraft and had a lot of work put into it, into making it a huge area. So knowing all of that, knowing how much work Blizzard had put into all this content, and how Blizzard even say that opening the Dark Portal was an upcoming feature before the game was even launched, I think it's fair to say that this was all planned content for vanilla. So what changed? Why did it get made into an expansion pack and not included with the base game? Well, any developer from any studio will tell you that games creation can change course during development. Also, I think the runaway success of World of Warcraft played a part too. They didn't expect to get the player numbers that they did.
We had planned to have 1 million users within the first 12 months of the game. We had those first 1 million users within like 3 or 4 months. So all of the equipment and servers that we had planned to deploy, we had meticulously planned every month we're going to deploy this many and this many. We basically deployed them all. We just said put them all up in the first 2-3 months.
Day one, we were actually shouting for correct numbers because the numbers that were coming in were so large that we thought that they were incorrect numbers and that the monitoring that we had in place was bogus. There was actually a time before WoW launched that we thought that we could probably get away with supporting World of Warcraft with 12 to 20 employees total. And we were a little bit off the mark there.
So pre-launch, Blizzard planned to keep the game going with a lot of content updates. If you look at the number of major content patches in vanilla compared to any other expansion pack, there are 12 content patches as opposed to 3 or 4. I believe that Blizzard were not expecting success on anything like the scale that what actually happened. So expansion packs were not on their mind. They were prepared to just keep adding content via patches. Again, the clip from earlier is rather telling.
We spent, all of our time really just trying to get things under control, and I would really say it was about 9 to 12 months after launch before we were like, I guess we should make an expansion for this game.
I think that after around 10 months post-launch, they saw that the demand for larger scale content updates was there. So they totally reworked the Dark Portal event, Karazhan, Caverns of Time, Black Morass and Hellfire Peninsula. They ended up hugely fleshing out this story arc into the Burning Crusade expansion pack to meet with the demand of content that they would soon be facing. So to bring this video back round to where we began, had World of Warcraft not seen the scale of success that it did, it's very possible that the Burning Crusade would have never happened, and instead we would have just had patch 1.13, and that would have been the Dark Portal story arc. But at least now, when some nutter on Reddit starts talking about adding content to Classic WoW once Nax is cleared, you can direct them to this video so their insane delusions can be somewhat fulfilled. Anyway, that's it from me. How about?